Greetings friends, and I swear this is the last time I'm talking about Game of Wool until episode 3 comes out. I wasn't aware of the press release from the Shetland Organisation of Knitters, or SOC, when I recorded my original video. I was by the time I did the re-record in the middle. However, even by that point I knew that I wanted to do a lot more research before I said anything about it, because quite frankly at this point the last thing anyone needs is yet another outwither, in both senses of the word, misunderstanding things and further muddying the waters. So, Fair Isle is an island in the Shetland Islands. They are called the Shetland Islands, not the Shetlands. So a really important part of British national dress, for lack of a better term, is the regional fishermen's jumpers. If you're not from Britain, and also quite honestly even if you are, you may not be aware of just how far away from everything else the Shetland Islands are, which is mainly relevant in the context of the fact that policy decisions made in government in London almost never think about how that's going to affect people living in the Highlands and Islands, and especially not when they're as far away as Shetland. Because what it's like to live between Edinburgh and Glasgow is drastically different from what it's like to live in the Outer Hebrides or Orkney or Shetland, who is probably the most extreme example of that. And so before we get into the specifics of the knitting and why what they did in the show isn't Fair Isle, I want you to understand how systematically sidelined people living on the islands of Scotland are. There are some very real material grievances between the islands and the mainland that are much more serious than misnaming a kind of stranded colourwork, but probably provide some context as to why people get quite so annoyed at the mislabeling of stranded colourwork as Fair Isle. All that being said, in the first episode of Game of Wool, they asked contestants to produce a Fair Isle tank top. The designs that most people produce could not be called Fair Isle. The show itself said that Fair Isle motifs are usually symmetrical and geometric. Obviously, a lot of people produced asymmetrical designs and a lot of pictorial motifs. Every source I could find also said that Fair Isle has very short floats, whereas many of the designs on the Game of Wool had extremely long floats. There was also some misuse of terminology and a few other things, but honestly I am not going to sit here and read out Shetland Organisation of Knitters press release to you. You should go and read it yourself. And while you're at it, they have a crowdfunding campaign going at the moment. The rewards include online talks and classes and also knitting patterns. I highly recommend you go and check it out because this is a living heritage craft and it deserves to be celebrated and protected.